What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Now today I have a comparison video with the Adidas Copa Pure 2 Plus and the Mizuno Morelia Neo 4 Beta Elite. Now I decided to compare these two just because they have similar construction. They both have a leather toe box and a synthetic midfoot, and so these are perfect to compare with each other just because I feel like they're very similar and both of them offer kind of the same feel but are a little bit different and unique in their own way. Now usually with the Copa I would compare it to the Tiempo, which is right there, but the Tiempo is no longer leather, doesn't have a leather upper, and so it's very difficult to compare both of them just because one is leather and one is synthetic. So I think the best next comparison is for sure the Mizuno Morelia Neo, and this one is the elite version, not the made in Japan version. Alright, so first we'll talk about the uppers, and like I said before, both of them have a leather toe box and a synthetic midfoot. Here the Mizuno Morelia does have a kangaroo leather toe box, so it is pretty soft, it is pretty premium. I will say straight out of the box, it does take a little bit more to just get even softer, but as with any leather boot, the more you wear it, the softer it gets. So now these are fully broken in and the leather quality is great. It's nice and soft. It feels great on feet. You guys can see it does have the stitch pattern, so it creates a little bit of cushioning from the leather. And the leather itself, it isn't overly thick, it's kind of on the thinner side, but because of the stitching, it does have a little bit more plushness to it. You guys can see what I mean. It kind of raises off a little, and the leather here kind of runs from this seam right here all across and all the way up to here. So here in the midfoot we do have a synthetic material here, and it is on the thinner side. There isn't really any padding to it, and there is a difference between the thinness of this and the thickness of the leather. Although on feet you don't really feel such a harsh transition, I would say it still feels pretty smooth, but the synthetic midfoot is still pretty soft and still provides a good amount of stability and structure. Here with the Adidas Copa we do have a calfskin leather, which again is pretty soft. It's not kangaroo leather, but this leather here is nice and soft. It's still nice high quality leather, I would say. It is kind of still on the thinner side. It's not overly thick, and you guys can see there is no stitching pattern whatsoever, but it's still very nice high quality leather, I would say. And the transitioning point is from this area of the boot all the way up to this seam right here, and this kind of transitions into right there. You guys can see fusion skin. You can tell that it's a little bit in hand, at least, that it is a different material like the Mizuno Morelia. Even though it kind of looks very similar, it is, you can feel it. This one does have, not firm, but it does feel a little bit more structured than the leather, and you can feel that on feet as well. I would say that this material does a fantastic job of feeling very consistent all throughout. You can feel it in hand that it's a different material and you can kind of see it, but once it's on feet it's very difficult to notice the transition point from leather to synthetic. It's very smooth, very seamless. It doesn't really feel like it is a synthetic midfoot, although when you tighten those laces it does wrap your foot a bit closer. It provides a good amount of stability and structure here in the midfoot. Now I would say that the material here on the lateral side is a bit thinner. There isn't really much padding, which is fine because you're not going to really making contact with the ball here. Here in the opposite side, there's a little bit more padding to it. I feel like this embossed areas do add a little bit more cushion, I guess, and it does a really good job in matching the thickness of the leather. So this part right here feels very consistent, I would say. And for the most part, I would say that the Copa does a better job at feeling seamless and having a better transition than the Mizuno Morelia. Even though the Mizuno Morelia, like I said before, it isn't bad, but you do notice that this material is a bit thinner than the leather. Now in terms of the fit, I will say that the Mizuno Morelia Neo does fit a bit closer to the foot. It is a lot slimmer than the Copa. You guys can see here, it is kind of a slimmer profile all throughout. The toe box here, it is leather, so it will stretch, and this is probably, I guess, the widest part of the boot just because it will stretch and the leather quality is really great, but it's not going to overstretch. Here in the midfoot for sure it is a lot slimmer and it does really hug your foot. So if you do have a really wide foot, I really wouldn't recommend this boot at all. I feel like if you have a medium width foot, you might be able to fit in these. I do have a kind of a medium width foot, and these fit me pretty good. I don't really have any pinching whatsoever. In the beginning it did hurt a little bit, it did have some pinching here on the side, but that kind of went away as I was playing with the boot and this material did get softer. So I feel like if you have like a medium width foot, you might be able to fit in these. It just might take some time to break in. But if you have a really wide foot, I would not recommend these at all. Now the fit on the Copa Pure 2, I feel like it's a lot better for people that have a wider foot. Overall, it isn't overly narrow, but it isn't like super wide at all. I feel like it has an average width. In the toe box, since it is leather, it will stretch a little and kind of forms to the shape of your toes. And here in the midfoot, like the synthetic will not stretch at all. But it does get softer and it does feel comfortable on feet. I didn't really find any like pressure points at all. I didn't find it really restrictive at all. And I just felt more comfortable in these than the Mizuno Morelia straight out of the box. So if you do have a wider foot, I would recommend checking the Copa Pure 2 out. And if you have an extremely wide foot, then I would just recommend going with the U-throw construction, which is the other version of the Copa Pure. I feel like that one just has a little bit more width just because it is a standard tongue construction, and so the upper can kind of stretch a little bit more. So I would recommend checking those out if you do have a super wide foot. The heel is one of the main differences here from each boot. Here in the Mizuno Morelia, we do have a suede heel liner, and there is a good amount of padding. You guys can see this gray material, and it goes all around the heel, and this is a great amount of padding in my opinion. It's not too much, not too little, and the padding is nice and soft, and this padding does a really good job of holding your heel in place and not letting it like move up and down or side to side. I found my heel very secure in these, no movement whatsoever, and you do get an external heel counter just that provides more stability, which I really like. In the Copa, I kind of had issues with this heel liner. You guys can see that there's like two padded pillows here, and there is a good amount of cushioning, but I found that these don't really do a good job of holding your heel. I still found movement in my heel. It's not so much like up and down, it's like side to side, and so that kind of found that annoying. It did get better when I wore grip socks and I tied my laces very tight here on the top. Then there was less movement in the boot, but I did find it a little bit annoying that I had to wear grip socks with these and tie my cleats very tight in order for me to have that nice secure sensation. And I feel also the internal heel counter is kind of soft. You guys can see I'm kind of like moving it with my hands, and I feel like there isn't enough stability in the heel for my liking. I just feel like there's a little bit more movement than I would like. But like I said, I do have ways of making the heel stability better, but that's kind of annoying that I have to like wear grip socks and like tie my cleats very, very tight on the top. Now here we have the sole plates, and the sole plate on the Mizuno Morelia is a one-piece sole plate with an external heel counter, and the sole plate itself has a good amount of like stiffness here in the midfoot. In the forefoot, for the most part, I feel like it's a bit more flexible, which I kind of like, but it still has a responsive feel to it. It's not overly flexible, but I feel like it goes really well with the soft like leather upper here. So I kind of like the sole plate. And here the stud pattern is all conical, and it does a really good job of providing bite but still like being able to move around. And I'm able to use these on AG and they're pretty good, so I had no issues with the sole plate or the stud pattern. So moving on to the Copa, here we have the Old Nemesis sole plate, which isn't as light. I feel like the Mizuno Morelia for sure is lighter, so if you guys want like a lighter boot, go with the Mizuno Morelia, and that kind of has to do with the sole plate. Here, the boot itself, it isn't overly heavy. It's not like super heavy, but it does have some weight compared to the Mizuno. And this sole plate I actually really like. I did like it in the Adidas Nemesis, and I like it here in the Copa. It has a good amount of stability here. And here in the forefoot, I feel like it has more like stiffness to it. Like it's more responsive than like this boot right here. I just found that this one has a little bit more like stiffness when like pushing off. And here the stud pattern is like these half conical studs, so I find these a little bit more aggressive than the stud pattern here found on the Mizuno Morelia. Because these are half moon shaped, I just feel like you get more bite when pushing off, but you're still able to move around and stuff. I didn't find myself getting stuck at all whatsoever. Well, in terms of performance, for the most part, you're going to have the same feel like on feet with the ball here in this toe area, just because it is leather. You're going to find the difference in the midfoot, where I find like the Mizuno Morelia just has a little bit more lockdown and more stability in the midfoot compared to the Copa. The Copa, it isn't bad, but I just feel like this material does a better job of just wrapping your foot and holding it tightly. Here in the Copa, when I was like cutting, I did feel a little bit of movement and a little bit of rollover. Not a crazy amount, but I did notice it more than when I wore the Mizuno Morelia. And like I said, the heel is an issue. I feel like when you're moving around or just even planting your foot, there's just a little bit of movement inside the heel, and it's kind of annoying. Here in the Mizuno, I found like no movement whatsoever in the heel. It was nice and stable. So in terms of performance, I would just give it to the Mizuno Morelia. Now both these cleats are amazing and they're kind of unique in their own way. I feel like people are gonna like these if you kind of like speed boots, if you like a tighter, slimmer fit, then go with the Mizuno Morelia. And for the Copa, I feel like those that miss the tempo and are kind of sad that the tempo isn't leather, you should really look at the Adidas Copa just because I feel like this is a really good boot and it kind of has similar vibes to what Nike was doing before. So I would really recommend looking at the Adidas Copa if you are missing the Nike tempo. So that's it for today's comparison video with the Adidas Copa and the Mizuno Morelia. Both these boots are fantastic. You can't go wrong with either one. It just depends on what you're looking for. If you guys did enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like, make sure to subscribe, and hit the bell notification so you're notified for future videos. I do have more playtests and more reviews coming, so make sure to hit the bell notification so you're notified for those videos. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.